Good evening. I'm Charles Duffy, and this is Political Pulse. Tonight we're honored to have the Speaker of the Maryland House, Michael Busch. Thanks so much for coming.
Charles, thanks for having me.
So what's it like being Speaker? The Capitol's beautiful. You got your office right in there. You walk up those beautiful steps and you go to work for 90 days a year. What's that like, Speaker Busch?
Well, it is a great thrill to be in the Capitol, and it is a very historic building. But after you do it a few times, it becomes somewhat routine going up the Capitol steps. Being Speaker is really a job that is kind of where your colleagues, the other elected delegates, select you to be the presiding officer of the House, just as the Senate becomes the presiding officer, the President of the Senate becomes the presiding officer there. So you're really selected by your colleagues after you're elected, and your job is to manage the business of the Maryland House of Delegates. You select the committee chairman and leadership team. You work with Minority Leader George Edwards, wonderful man from Western Maryland, and you try to put forward your agenda as well as work with the administration's agenda. At the end of the year, you try to come to some kind of consensus with the Senate and the governor on legislation that passes forward to become law in the state.
You've been Speaker for 3 years, and I know you were in the House of Delegates for 16 years before that. And I'm trying to figure out what guides your decisions. Is it kind of like a gut kind of reaction, instinct? I remember when Phil Gramm was running for president. He's a Republican, and he always used to say that he would try to put his shoes in, put himself in the shoes of one of his constituents, and he would name that constituent and say,
the guy that owned the hardware store.
What would he do if he's sitting at the dining room table? And how about Speaker Mike Busch? How does he make his decisions?
Well, let me just say this. By profession, I am a teacher. I came out of college in the 60s, and I was influenced very much by the Kennedy Johnson administration. I went to school in Philadelphia in turbulent times in the 60s, civil rights, equal rights in America. And I came back as a teacher, taught history and coached football and basketball. And when you deal with young kids, either as a teacher or as a coach, you learn a lot about yourself. And you understand that to be a leader, you have to elevate the people around you and bring the best out of them. I got elected with no real political agenda other than to try to solve problems and to act fairly and do what I believe was in the best interest of the community. So that's kind of what's guided me since I've been in elected office.
Why did you throw your hat in the ring the first time? And what was the impulse? I'm going to run for something.
That's a good question. I mean, actually, in my wildest dreams, I never thought I'd run for a political office. It was really moms and dads, kids I coached at a small school in Annapolis, St. Mary's High School, that said, you should try to run for a political office. There was 2 open seats in my county in District 30. I ran as a Democrat. I've been a lifelong Democrat. Went out and knocked on doors and was elected. And when I first got there, I was thrilled to be part of the history of Maryland. To see your name go up on that board for the first time is a pretty thrilling thing, I have to tell you. I mean, I feel very good for every one of the legislators who come in as freshmen and they see themselves with their name on the board and they vote for laws that affect the citizens of the state. And I didn't know whether I wanted to stay or not, quite candidly. I mean, I was in judiciary, I was a non-lawyer. I thought, I didn't know whether I was doing anything of benefit to my community or to myself. And I was fortunate the second term to get elected and be part of the Economic Matters Committee, where I really gained an interest in the business climate, private enterprise, healthcare in general. And I worked for a wonderful man who was my mentor in the legislature, who was Cass Taylor, my predecessor as Speaker of the House. So I was very fortunate to have Cass as a committee chairman and Cass as Speaker to work for him. And I became the chairman of the House Economic Matters Committee. There was only there's only 6 standing committees in the House. There's 23 members to the committee, and I thought this is really quite a privilege to do this. And I just started to put all my energies into trying to resolve problems within basically the private sector. I mean, most of the time it was competition between architects and engineers or insurance companies and providers or different areas of the business community. And I got really involved in healthcare and the healthcare delivery system when it was changing here. And I was very fortunate to have, like I say, the guidance of Cass Taylor there.
Mm-hmm. And it is interesting how you became speaker. I mean, Cass Taylor actually ran for election out in Western Maryland, and into the night he was losing by 100 or 150 votes. And I guess at some point it looked like, you said to yourself, it looks like he's going to lose. And that next morning, I think I read that you looked at the ceiling and you said, "Hey, I want to be speaker. I'm going to start picking up the phone and calling people."
Well, actually, it started before then. I mean, Cass and I are very close. I mean, we talked to each other before the election, while the election was actually going on. I thought Cass was going to be all right. He thought he was going to be all right. I talked to him throughout the day. I came in for my own election. Was glad to see that I was reelected by the citizens of District 30, and I was ready to go home. I was tired, I was exhausted, and Tom Lewis, who was the aide to Cass Taylor and then eventually the aide to my office, came in and said, "You better come back and call Cass, he's in trouble." So at 11 o'clock at night we went back and talked to Cass. He was down by about 150 or 60 votes with a couple precincts to go, and we came to the conclusion, with his knowledge, and I mean basically with his blessing, is to start calling around, because if he wasn't going to get elected, there had to be a successor, and you had to move in a expedited way. I mean, those kind of things create a vacuum, and if you don't, take advantage of it, that opportunity doesn't come around again. So we started that night to 2:30 in the morning. Then I went home and looked at the ceiling until 7 o'clock and tried to figure out who I could call without upsetting them before 8 o'clock in the morning.
Interesting.
And by noontime that day, I basically had rounded up the votes to be Cass's successor, with the caveat that if there was a election recount, that he would retain a seat. I would have stepped aside if he would have got the votes.
Interesting. Well, let's talk about some issues. We got, starting in January, the 2006 session, and there's a lot of articles in the papers about the horse racing industry, breeders leaving the state, bettors going out of state. I mean, there's 18,000. I've read there's 18,000 jobs tied up in the industry. And is it possible next session there might be some type of non-slots compromise to kind of help out the industry, or is it just kind of market, that's, the industry, you're not making it on your own, we're gonna, sorry.
Well, you're basically down to the crux of the issue now. I think when the governor came in, I mean, he made the slots a panacea for almost everything. I mean, we weren't going to be able to fund Thornton in education unless we had slots. We weren't going to have school construction money unless we had slots. We weren't going to have money for health care unless we were going to have slots. I mean, it became the panacea for everything. And to me, it was a quick fix solution. It wasn't the way a state like Maryland, one of the wealthiest states in the union, should have tried to resolve our economic problems. And I resisted that. And the first year, the governor actually had a tough time even getting a slots bill together. And then at the end, he wanted to put it basically at racetracks, but only racetracks in predominantly blue-collar African-American communities, and didn't want to put them in places like Timonium and Ocean Downs. So that was a non-starter for many of us in the House, and we decided we should go take a look at it and see if, in fact, we were going to do it, what were we trying to accomplish. I mean, there's arguments about money going out of state, there's arguments you need to balance your budget, and there's arguments you need it for the horse racing industry. Well, the horse racing industry, in all honesty, is at a disadvantage because the surrounding states artificially supply funding to the purses.
With the slots.
They take a revenue. They take money out of the slots and artificially underwrite the purses at the racetrack. However, if everybody gets slots, in my opinion, is that that'll become a competitive industry, and the first thing they're going to cut back on is supplementing the horse racing industry. I think the horse racing industry has some fundamental economic problems that it has to resolve for itself. I mean, just like any other entertainment venue, it's got to compete against football, basketball, rock concerts, you name it. And it has a rich tradition in Maryland. But the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of what I consider archaic rules that have really hindered the expansion of horse racing in Maryland. For argument's sake, thoroughbred racing, which is the preeminent horse racing in the state of Maryland, thoroughbreds being the flats that run at Pimlico and Laurel and where the Preakness is, the Triple Crown, and there's standardbreds, which are the ones with the sulkies that run at Rosecroft and Ocean Downs. But thoroughbred racing is the heart and soul of Maryland horse racing. And they can't race after 6:15 at night. I mean, there's an artificial barrier that's been there for 20-some years that was put there by the standardbred owners. So you can't race at night. So when people are off and would maybe like to go to the racetrack, they're basically shut down for live racing. So I think you need to remove that barrier. That has been something that's been there for years. But racing, we've tried to enhance racing over the years by giving them track-to-track betting. They have simulcasting, which means they can bring in the signal from all over the country to bet. Matter of fact, there's $4 bet on simulcasting for every dollar bet on live racing. We gave them track-to-track betting simulcasting. We gave them the ability to have off-track betting locations so they could establish places. They never took advantage of that opportunity because you could never get an agreement of proper splits. In other words, how much money standardbreds would get from simulcasting and how much thoroughbreds would get from it. So there's only 2 or 3 off-track betting locations in the state. And if they'd had a network of viable off-track betting locations, there would have been more money coming in over the years. So you have to upgrade that. You have to do away with the 615 waiver. I think you have to upgrade the facilities at the racetracks to attract people to that venue. People have to want to go back. I mean, even where they have slots, the handles, which are what is bet on racing, has not escalated to the point where you would think that there's more interest from fans in horse racing.
But next session, it seems like you recognize there's some problems here. Do you think that at least the House will try to do something to help the horse racing industry, or is it just a matter where, hey, by your own rules or by whatever, you guys aren't making it? It's like any other industry. If you don't make it, it's the market forces.
I think there's a combination of things. I think you have to make a determination how much you're going to invest in the industry. I mean, they are at a competitive disadvantage with surrounding states. I mean, that is a fact. But no one knows exactly what that competitive disadvantage is. I mean, people have been trying to estimate it in all the slots bills. Last year, I mean, the governor wanted to give the racing industry $100 million just for purses between standardbreds and thoroughbreds. So that's $100 million that could be going someplace else, and you don't even know what you're setting that against, for argument's sake. I mean, the slots bill the governor had 7 locations, anywhere between 15 and 20,000 slot machines on those locations, basically in the Baltimore, Washington corridor. You were going to have 2 in Prince George's, one at Rosecroft, one most likely at National Harbor. You would have Laurel. You would have 2 in Baltimore, either one downtown or on the other side of town, one at Pimlico, most likely one in Western Maryland and one up in Cecil County under the governor's proposal. So, I mean, that in my mind was too many slot facilities. There was not a competitive bid for those facilities. These are entitlements. So I didn't think that
Seems like you're not convinced. You need more information and before you do anything.
Well, I think that in all honesty, I think you have to come up with what is a fair and equitable way to support the horse racing industry and hold them accountable. I think there's got to be accountability in whatever you give them. I mean, at one point we gave them $10 million a year from lottery overages for purses.
Let me just stop you there. We're going to have to take our break. It went kind of quickly, but we're going to be right back with Speaker Mike Busch. Thank you. We were talking about horse racing. How about the Preakness, Speaker? It's going to be here next year, but there's no guarantee, I guess, down the road that it's going to remain at Pimlico.
Well, look, first of all, I think the Preakness is a great event. It's one of the 3 premier races in the country. Actually, last year, they exceeded estimates of revenues. They made $7.3 million at the Preakness. You had 115,000 people at the Preakness, which begs the issue. I mean, obviously, you can attract people to horse racing if you market it properly and have a proper venue. I mean, if NASCAR racing can make it nationally, so can horse racing. I think the horse racing industry in general has not done a very good job of marketing itself on national TV. The Preakness is, I think, will remain here because when in 1986 we reduced the purse tax in Maryland from 4.1% to 0.03%, which is a $15 million a year subsidy to the horse racing industry by reducing that tax. That subsidy or reduction was given with the caveat that if Preakness ever went there, that the racing tax would go back up. Magna's invested about $150 million here. Their premier race is the Preakness. If they would remove it, for all intents and purposes, there would not be any kind of successful racing in the state, and their property would be valueless as a racing enterprise, and they would have to come to the state and get permission to sell it for anything other than a racetrack. So I don't think that Preakness is going to leave unless Magna wants to give up a $150 million investment in the state of Maryland.
Interesting. I don't think a lot of people realize that. Let's move on to the 2006 race, and I think it's clear what.
And that's a horse race.
That's going to be a heck of a horse race, I'll tell you. All of it's starting about now, but Governor Ehrlich, I mean, it's clear what one of his main platforms is going to be is that, hey, I inherited a big budget deficit from Paris Glendening, the Democratic governor, the last governor. Now we have a surplus of $1.2 billion. Doesn't the executive get to take credit for that, just like the president of the United States when there's a good economy?
Look, I think elections, take on lives of their own depending on what the dynamic of the time is. When we came into the session, we were in a deficit. I mean, like every other state in the union, we were in an economic downturn, particularly with 9/11. 9/11 took place. Every state basically had to come up with some kind of revenue enhancements. Basically, what we did when Governor Ehrlich came in was that we borrowed from the Transportation Trust Fund. We borrowed $300 million. We cut local governments, and we've raised fees. We've raised $300 million annually now in fees. If you go to register your car now, if you have a truck, it's $180. An SUV, it's $180. If you have a sedan, it's $128. Those fees is doubled. That's $175 million.
Even though he calls them fees and not taxes?
Well, I think for the people to pay them, whether it's a fee, a tax, or assessment, it all counts the same when
because it's out of pocket.
But that's $300 million a year. He raised the property tax 5 cents, which is about $200 million a year. And unfortunately, the governor cut higher education by a greater amount than any other state in the union, and our tuition for our higher education institutions, state institutions, have gone up 40% in the last 3 years. That's one thing I really think it will have be a detriment on our economy. So we've made those decisions. The governor basically is responsible for those. At the same time, the governor can take credit for any kind of economic benefit that we've had. But this administration has come in overspending affordability in every session, and the $1.2 billion surplus is something that you can tout in some respects, but the fact of the matter is most of that's got to be spent on appropriations next year. $400 million is by law is what we have to fund for K through 12 education with the expansion of Thornton. $300 million is our annual match with Medicaid. We have to do that. That's a federal mandate. So those $700 million out of the $1.2 billion surplus. If we fund local government, don't cut highway user money, that's another $100 million, so you're up to $800 million. And if we fund education and don't require our higher education and don't require our universities to increase tuition this year, that'll be another $80 million in revenue. So you're up to 880, close to $900 million in revenues before you even get into some of the other programs that you would like to fund. So that surplus is basically accounted for. It's like if you got your paycheck, you got $1,000, and you went home, you didn't pay your mortgage or your car payment, you would have $1,000 to spend. Right. But most responsible people are going to pay their mortgage, their car payment, their food, and everything else.
Well, you have those bills coming down the road. And it looks like everything's connected. And my understanding about Medicaid, and you're an expert on the healthcare area, but that you get money from the federal government, and everything's connected. That if the feds aren't giving the state money, you can't send money to the local governments. But Hurricane Katrina is going to be very expensive at the federal level. I think already $60 billion has been authorized, but will that affect monies that Maryland gets some way, like for Medicaid, for this, for that? No?
No, look, I mean, the federal government, unfortunately, can deficit spend. I mean, I don't think our government has ever been in the debt that it's currently in, between the war, between the spending that's taking place in Washington, and between Hurricane Katrina. And I do think you have to step up for the victims of Hurricane Katrina. But the government will not make any appropriate changes, I don't believe, and they will continue to deficit spend. And unfortunately, that puts our country and our nation in a quandary. States can't do that. We have to balance our budget. I mean, we do make the tough decisions at the state level, and I will say this for Governor Ehrlich, the Democrats and the Republicans together, we have balanced our budget every year, and we retain a AAA bond rating. We're one of 6 states that still have a AAA bond rating. That's kind of like graduating at the top of your class as far as fiscal management is concerned. So Maryland is in very good shape. I mean, in some respects, we're very blessed to be next to Washington because we're the beneficiary of a lot of grants and money that come from the federal government. NIH is obviously a large employer. They give out grants. Johns Hopkins gets more grants than any institution of its kind in the country. It is the largest employer in the state, 45,000 employees, and grows 1,000 jobs a year. Our biotechnology industry is thriving, and our unemployment rate is a full point below the national average. So Maryland is doing very well in this area, basically because in some respects, when America is in conflict like they are in Iraq, the defense industry ramps up. NSA hires Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin. They're getting large contracts. So Maryland does very well in that job market. But for us to stay competitive there, our higher education system has to excel. I mean, we have the highest percentage of college graduates in the workforce here and the highest percentage of postgraduates in the workforce, in the state of Maryland. So, I mean, it's important for us to have a viable higher education system. I mean, as Bill Gates said, if you're going to have a vibrant economy in this day and age, you have to be next to a world-class research center. And University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, Georgetown, all those are stepping up to the plate. But the University of Maryland's our flagship, and we need to invest in that.
We're all a product, speaker, of our life's experiences, and you were very involved in sports. I mean, you played football, you played in college, you had a knee injury, you probably would have been drafted. But how does that kind of those lessons of being involved in sports, I've heard sometimes, or I've read in the paper sometimes before your delegates go out there for a big vote or there's going to be a contentious hearing, you give them a pep talk almost. I know you were a football coach back at St. Mary's High in Annapolis, but does that kind of stay with you, those?
Well, I think, to be good in athletics, I think athletics is a great equalizer. Regardless of your economic background, your race, your ethnicity, when you compete, I mean, people choose you because of your ability and your desire to work. And I think in politics, if you believe in something and you work at it, and you instill that belief in others, I think it becomes a benefit. And we had to define what we believed in. The Democratic Caucus of Maryland. Did we believe strongly in K through 12 education? Yes, we did. Did we believe in funding higher education? Yes, we did. Did we believe in an accessible, affordable health care system? Yes. So when it came down to getting the votes to fully fund Thornton and take on the administration and the Republican Party, we did that. When it came to funding higher education, we put a bill out there that said we would raise the corporate income tax by 10% to fund higher education and limit it to 5% increases in tuition. We also came back and had a medical malpractice bill that the governor had touted, called a special session for, which passed. then vetoed by the governor. With the help of all the hospitals, the nursing homes, and physicians in the state who came down and asked for a veto override, we were able to get the 85 votes in the House and 29 in the Senate to do that. But that's because you have to believe in what you think is in the best interest of the citizens of Maryland. And I think that's some of the defining things that people ought to be held accountable for in elections. What do you stand for? I mean, are you going to give lip service to those issues, or are you going to stand up for them? I mean, there's a lot of people in today's world that can announce problems, but there's a lot of very few people that will stand up and be held accountable for those problems.
Well, it's like some elected people are good at getting elected, but not good at governing. But it sounds like you're talking about the governing part, which is obviously an important part. I wanted to ask you, who are some of the major influences, or who's the major influence in your life?
Aside from my parents, I had very loving parents, and they supported me all through my life. My mother and my father. Matter of fact, as a young man, I don't think my parents ever, if ever, rarely missed a event that I ever participated in, whether it was Boy Scouts or sports or any other extracurricular activities. A great influence in my life is Bob Pascal, who was a friend of mine that helped nurture me in politics. He was a county executive. He was a Republican county executive that bridged political parties, came down as the appointment secretary for William Donald Schaefer. But a good man and a guy that is with you in good times and bad times. So probably the greatest influence outside of my parents would have been Bob Pascal. And then I was very fortunate to have people like Cass Taylor as a mentor in the General Assembly, and a lot of great colleagues, John Herson, Kumar Barve, Sheila Hicks, and others from the Montgomery County, Prince George's County area.
Mm-hmm. We just have about a minute left, and I know you have two daughters. I know they're the apples.
Yeah, sure. Purpose of the journey.
Purpose of the journey. And I think Bob Pascal, I read an article where you said he could say no to you without you feeling bad about
I think
things.
One of his great attributes was he could tell people no and make them feel good about themselves. Some people in this business tell people yes and they dislike them. Mm-hmm. I think Bob Pascal had the ability to say, look, I understand what you're going through, but I just can't do that right now, and I hope you can understand. And there was people who would leave there and felt like they had an honest opportunity to put forth their opinion and got that honest chance and an honest answer. And I think that's what people look for. I mean, I think at times you have to say no, but it's the way you say it. Mm-hmm.
Speaker, thanks so much. We've run out of time.
It's always been fun to be here.
Thanks very much, Speaker. And
thanks.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And I'd also like to send this show out to my newborn son, Matthew David Duffy, and of course, my wife, Bonnie Hogue Duffy. If it's Tuesday night at 9:30 or Thursday night at 9, it's Political Pulse on Channel 16. We'll see you next week.